All right, folks. So as I was ending yesterday's weekly overview, I mentioned something that I wasn't convinced that everyone would stay for, because I mentioned something that after I do my spiel about subscribing to the channel and liking and commenting, and if you were interested in getting a personal reading, where to get my information, all that kind of stuff. And of course, I'll do that at the end of every video, so I'll do it at the end of this one as well. But there was a thought that occurred to me, and a thought that I'd actually prepared for. It's not just a passing thought or passing fancy, something I think is actually quite important. And I thought, and so yesterday, at the end, very end of the video that I did, the weekly overview that I did, I said that I would mention that point again in this video. And on reflecting, and this happens often for me, you do a reading, you can't put astrology to some extent, or astrological insights into some sort of a time capsule, where it's just like, okay, I'm done. It's like a tap that keeps flowing. And so I had a couple of other thoughts, insights that I wanted to pass on. Hopefully this will be a short video, because I just feel like I'm putting out a lot of a fair amount of content, irrespective. You're welcome to pick and choose what works for you. Now, what I said yesterday, as we know, Mercury is retrograde right now, and Mercury is retrograde in Aries, and there were 4 astrological events over the course of the week. If we take the weeks of April 8th to April 15th, one, of course, was the new moon solar eclipse in Aries yesterday on April the 8th, and there's a separate video on that I put out, not yesterday, but the one right before that. So you can look at that if you want to consider more about that particular eclipse conjuncting Chiron in Aries. There's, of course, 3 other things we talked about in yesterday's weekly overview. The fact that Mars conjuncts Saturn in Pisces tomorrow, the fact that a retrograde Mercury and the Sun conjunct on April the 11th, 2 days from now, and on April the 15th, a retrograde Mercury conjuncts Chiron. This is the second of 3 conjunctions with Chiron that Mercury will make as part of its Mercury retrograde journey this time around, from April 1st to April 25th in Aries. Even though Mercury is retrograde for those days, there is a specific part of your chart that it is going to cross over 3 times by virtue of being retrograde. It will be going direct roughly between 15 and 28 odd degrees of Aries, then retrograde over that same period. On April 25th, it's going to go direct again, and it will remain in its shadow degrees or its shadow period till, I can give you that information, May the 13th, at 27 degrees of Aries. So one of the things that is worth considering, of course, is why is Mercury retrograde in Aries? And why is a retrograde Mercury conjuncting Chiron 3 times? And what is the special significance of this, given the fact that the new moon solar eclipse that we just had yesterday is conjunct Chiron not only to the degree but to the minute? The sun and the moon and Chiron were in complete alignment at the time of the new moon yesterday, which was also a solar eclipse. Now, with Mercury retrogrades, we talked about the fact that January, February, March, period of forward movement, and then Mercury, the planet of cognition, decides to go backwards and outside of regular Mercury retrograde shenanigans that we all talk about. Oh, Mercury must be retrograde, miscommunications, emails going to the wrong place, mail not getting where it needs to get to, bags getting lost, travel snafus, technical delays, all sorts of shenanigans. The larger purpose of Mercury going retrograde, I believe, and I find, is for Mercury to give us a reality check and inform us of what I call things that have been in our blind spot as we've been moving forward, things that we have been assuming, or things that we have been suspecting but not been sure of, and a retrograde Mercury says, here's the truth about it. So it's an important reality check. It is an important period of going back to our project plan or our drawing board, or taking a bit of a pause. And we talked about the fact that the month of April was signified by sort of the Hanged Man in the Tarot, and taking a bit of a pause to see things from a slightly different perspective, illuminate the crown chakra, etc. So all of this is going somewhere. It's not just I'm doing another video to recap all sorts of things that I've talked in 2 or 3 videos already. And consider and take in that information. And if there's a resonance that we are considering moving forward in a much desired direction that was articulated in July, August of 2023, or the second half of 2023, then this particular retrograde, along with the eclipses, gives us the ability to reconnect with, reconfirm, recalibrate where it is that we're headed, and also makes us aware of what the obstacles are. And if there are to be 2 different timelines, once we determine what our commitment really is, what our destination really is, after Mercury is done with its retrograde. We're technically done with both the eclipses now, except that, you know, I always say the week before, week after the eclipse. If we look at sort of the eclipse period, I would start at the week before March the 25th to the week after April the 8th, so the rest of this week till April the 15th, when a retrograde Mercury conjuncts Chiron. But of course, the new moon solar eclipse sets up various timelines, a regular 4-week timeline as part of the fact that it's a new moon, a 2-month timeline looking to June the 8th, particularly for those who have Mercury direct in their birth charts, because whatever it is that this eclipse is bringing, we may not be ready to commit to it. It may not be wise to commit to or start something necessarily related to this until after Mercury actually goes direct, so until the end of April, beginning of May, or maybe even timed with the May 8th new moon. And so we're looking ahead to June the 8th, just shortly after the Gemini new moon, as being a marker for this new moon solar eclipse as well. And of course, we're looking to the normal eclipse timelines, 6 months from yesterday and till the middle of 2025, when these Aries eclipses will be exercising their desired pull. So all of that. So in the middle of that, worth pondering why it is, if it's Aries is the direction that we are meant to move in, that's where the North Node eclipses are, and that's where we're meant to take on, initiate projects and work, etc., then worth thinking about why it is that Mercury has gone retrograde in Aries. What do we need to consider, factor, know about what has been in our blind spot? How are we going to move forward? With Mars conjuncting Saturn, we talked about the fact that it might be a great time to go back to our overall plans. Not only is this particularly resonant where Mars is conjuncting Saturn in the sign of Pisces, which needs to be stabilized and sorted out and sorted through, and determine what we're going to fight for, or what we're going to let go of, and what we're going to potentially release or not. And, you know, for those of you, this particular card is in a different place, but for those of you who know the tarot, the Saturn in Pisces card is the 8 of Cups, which is a card of leaving something almost complete to either go in a different direction altogether, or I also interpret that card as finding that last missing piece. So however you want to, Mars conjuncting one thing I wanted to mention this, one of the viewers of this channel said something that I thought was really neat. And I may have said something like this in my video yesterday. It certainly made sense, but it was the way it was put, the idea that Mars is being checked by Saturn. And I thought that was a really great way to look at it, both related to the sign of Pisces and as a general description of the energy of the last, 72 hours and even of the next 24 hours, which is a kind of a Mars, which is our impulsive yang energy, pursuing of goals, dealing with competition and conflict, setting our boundaries, the testosterone planet, the fighter planet, at its best assertive and not aggressive, but can tip over into becoming a bull in the china shop. It's a great way to think about the fact that each of us has this kind of masculine energy in us, somewhere in our charts, in our birth charts, but in us. And so I think it's great to think of that particular energy being checked, as this particular viewer said, by Saturn, which is, what is your plan? How are you going to respond and not react? What are your goals? What is your plan of action? How are you going to build a strong foundation or structure in the Pisces part of the chart? I really like that analogy. Now, in certain cases, as I said yesterday, if the Mars conjunction Saturn is actually somebody hurting you in some way, or putting something in place behind your back or something along those lines, if it's actually an attack, because both those planets it can have a, then it gives you, then, well, it still gives you the opportunity to determine how it is that you're going to deal with it. And if you decide that, if some of you are clear about the fact that something like this is happening and are taking action now, that's fine. There's something about the action. Mars conjunct Saturn, as I said yesterday, there is no better aspect with regard to making plans that can have long-term trying to find the right word, kind of a long-term benefit, long-term strategy, an effective long-term strategy that can really build a foundation and a strong structure in the Pisces part of the chart. But it's sort of the general energy anyway. Mars is conjuncting Saturn. Stop, think, where are you going? What are you doing? What's the most effective way to pursue goals here, to create an edifice here, and to also deal with whatever it is that needs to be stabilized. In the Pisces part of your chart, by that I mean the house occupied by the sign of Pisces and what that stands for, and in general, because that kind of go back to the drawing board energy is also suggested by a retrograde Mercury. And with the eclipses, it remains important to show up to every opportunity and pay attention to what is going on, and therefore being in action, but you also have to let the eclipses accelerate change, eclipsing things in, eclipsing things out, and give yourself time to process and see what exactly has been released in the sign of Libra, the house occupied by the sign of Libra, since October 14th to March the 25th. Solar eclipse of October 14th, lunar eclipse of March the 25th, October 14th, 23, March 25th, 24. And of course, it remains to be seen to some extent what it is that North Node solar eclipse, new moon yesterday is going to bring. But in general, there is this sense of, all right, let's go. And I'm going to expand on that in 1 second. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about in this video was this idea of Saturn checking Mars, and us all perhaps using this energy wisely to just, I think also with Mercury retrograde and the eclipses, it's easy, even if you're trying to be as steady as possible, to get whipped up into a frenzy, for your mind to go into overdrive. To be so intuitively attuned to what is going on, to know that the solutions or direction for many of us is not entirely clear yet, that it may indeed be wise to be checked by Saturn, so that we really can, as I like to say with Saturn, respond and not react. And no other planet needs to be checked more when it comes to reacting as opposed to responding than Mars. Mercury does to some extent because it's our communication, but Mars is the energy that is behind that communication. Mars and Venus are how we would respond to stimulus and opportunity and relationships. And sometimes it makes sense to respond in a Venusian way, but sometimes you have to respond in a Mars way if you're going to protect whatever it is that you value. Sometimes we've got to plant the seeds and till the soil and chop the wood and make the fire and sturdy the house and keep the animals from eating our crops and food supply, and keep out people who want to take what is ours, kind of stuff. So Mars is not without its importance or its value. So this idea of Saturn checking Mars and us all perhaps feeling a little bit, now that the two eclipses are behind us and now that there's been a certain amount of frenzy of Mercury going on, Mercury's conjuncting the sun, may not be a bad idea to just take a bit of a break when the moon is dark. And we ourselves are going to find that we really, even after the new moon, because the moon is still so dark, kind of feel like we need to rest and we need to sleep and we need to, the moon is dark. You have plenty of opportunities to feel sleepless as we head towards any full moon, and you will in about 2 weeks' time. So when the moon is dark, our emotional and our intuitive, the certain aspect of our energy is going to be low. So don't be surprised. I said not only 48 to 72 hours before a new moon, but especially 24 to 48 hours before a new moon, but even 24 to 48 hours after a new moon when the moon is dark, to observe just how readily, if you're close to a bed or a pillow, you may just want to rest and recharge. The energy is going to be different prior to a new moon. It's much more release, inactive. The energy after a new moon in terms of rest is going to be much more yang. Let me rest so I can get my energy so that I can move forward on this, and much more thinking about what needs to get done. Okay, the primary thing that I wanted to talk about in this video, that I talked about at the end of yesterday's video, is not only thinking about what a retrograde Mercury is informing us about or telling us or revealing to us about the direction that it is that we are being encouraged to move in and lean into in the Aries part of the chart, but also what is the retrograde Mercury telling us about the two houses it rules? All the planets rule certain signs. The sun rules Leo. Mars rules Aries and Scorpio. Scorpio's co-ruled with Pluto. Venus rules Libra and Taurus. Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius. Aquarius is co-ruled with Uranus. Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces. Pisces is co-ruled with Neptune, and so on. The moon rules Cancer. Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. So in your chart, and someone said, can I just kind of explain this a little bit more slowly? So that's kind of the reason why I'm going over this. In your chart, the signs of Gemini and Virgo are going to be somewhere in your chart, and they are going to occupy a certain house. So those houses are ruled by Mercury. Which are the houses that have Gemini and Virgo in them? I use whole signs, WHOLE, the whole sign house system. So for me, a sign is in a house. Now, those of you who use other house systems may find that the signs are sitting across multiple houses. I'm gonna let you go with whatever makes you comfortable. But I use whole signs. So if someone has the option to choose that and is not wedded to a house system, experiment with that by all means. So which are the houses in your chart that have Gemini and Virgo in them? And I'm telling you, I would not be surprised if I were to ask you, what is this or any Mercury retrograde telling you about why you need to reverse related to matters in both those houses in your chart? I think you'll be able to say, aha, why do you need to slow down? What needs to be corrected? What needs to be looked at again? What needs to be sorted out? What needs to be completed? What needs to be kept and thrown out? What needs to be revisited? What needs to be reevaluated is a word that I use more with regard to Venus being retrograde. But rethought related to those two houses. So with the Mercury retrograde, those are three broad questions I would ask. Why is Mercury retrograde right now, and what is it telling me, and what is it bringing to my attention? Generally, that has been in my blind spot. How does that affect the Aries part of the chart, where Mercury is retrograde, and we just had the new moon solar eclipse, and I'm being asked to lean into. Always remember where the North Node is, to lean into it in a grounded manner, so you're not throwing all sorts of caution to a wind and doing a number on your emotional and financial security. You can still find ways absolutely to lean into and build your strength and explore the Aries part of the chart while keeping your camel tethered, your financial and emotional camel tethered. It's a metaphorical thing. Please don't go out and get a camel. And not only broadly, what is this Mercury retrograde bringing to your attention? Showing you, sorry, that made me laugh. Showing you whatever was in your blind spot, or confirming what you may have intuitively wondered, or had a question mark around but did not have clarity around. But also, what is the retrograde Mercury telling you to rethink, relook at, reconsider in the Gemini and Virgo houses in your chart? If the Gemini and Virgo houses are financial houses, the second house or the eighth house, you could be experiencing some sort of a slowdown with a retrograde Mercury. It's not a permanent slowdown, but especially, it really depends. It really depends on what's going on. It really depends, but it's not nearly, the cash flow is not going to be nearly as fast as when Mercury's direct and moving fast. Now, if you have, and I've said this over and over again, but again, for anyone that's new and watching this as a first video, if you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, the Mercury retrograde time frame and the ahas will likely make you feel more decisive. And you may feel like you are ready to take action. In which case, if it resonates for you and if it feels right and you feel like you're in sync with things and you feel like you've been pondering things for a while and you know that you need to move forward on certain things, by all means, if it feels right to you, do so. Just remember, with Mercury being retrograde, check the details. Make sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Look at things 3 times, 5 times if you need to, just to make sure everything is in there. Someone hasn't mistyped $1,000 when it should be $10,000. You can make that mean whatever it is. For those of you who have Mercury direct, you likely are advised not to commit to things when Mercury is retrograde, as it is till April the 25th, to go back to the drawing board, look at things, and postpone committing to things or starting things until Mercury is direct and picks up just a tiny bit of speed. So maybe by after April 27th, 20, I would say 28th onwards. Sometimes something presents itself that we really want to commit to while Mercury is retrograde. Fine. Just know that the details around it may likely change once Mercury is direct, and the project may be more short-lived than has been advertised or thought about when it has been presented to you or when you commit to it while Mercury is retrograde. So 2 things so far we've talked about in this video, building on yesterday's weekly overview. The idea of Saturn checking Mars, and this idea of the new moon solar eclipse has happened and we're ready to now go and move forward, and I'll expand on that in a second. But some of the astrological energy this week with the retrograde Mercury and the Mars-Saturn conjunction is saying, let's just pause for a second, partly to give our overactive, anxious, confused minds a bit of a break, and so that we can reground ourselves, pay attention to what we feel or know is actually going on and what it is that the retrograde Mercury is bringing to our attention. We don't have to be in a rush. We can make some decisions around what we can control and what we cannot control. And if we're thinking of taking actions or shooting off that email or doing that communication or whatever it is, clearly the instructions are different if you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart or direct in your birth chart. If it's retrograde and you feel decisive and it feels good and it feels right, check in with yourself. I mean, it's your action. You've got to know what it feels like and whether it feels right to do or not. The buck stops with you. So think about it in that regard. If you have Mercury direct, really think about whether you should be, whether it's time for, with both Mercury retrograde and Mars conjunct Saturn, I love this idea of our yang action-oriented self being checked for a second. And with the conjunction with Saturn tomorrow, about 24 hours from when I'm doing this video, it's 2:37 p.m. For me, I think the Mars-Saturn conjunction is between 1:30 and 2 p.m. tomorrow, Pacific time. This idea of let's make a solid long-term plan about how we're going to move forward. And that means defining what does stability and a strong foundation, a strong structure look like in general in our lives, but especially in the Pisces part of the chart that's been missing structure. And then let's plan on taking actions accordingly. What do we need to do to think this through? Have a plan. Respond, not react. And then the second thing that I have just mentioned is, with this Mercury retrograde conjuncting Chiron 3 times, the same Chiron that the new moon solar eclipse conjuncted to the minute, what do you think is the purpose of this Mercury retrograde? Affecting the Aries part in general, affecting the Aries part of your chart, but also, fascinatingly, the Gemini and Virgo parts of the chart. Why did it move back? Why is it going over Chiron 3 times? What needs to be healed? What is the wound? What is keeping you from moving forward in a whole and complete way, as opposed to a wounded, hurt? And what that typically translates to is kind of a lack of self-confidence way. Use April to clean up Pisces. We talked about this idea of the arrow being drawn back. Preparation. Are you ready? If you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart and you're being decisive by April the 25th, great. Are you ready to make those decisions? If you have Mercury direct in your birth chart and you are clear that some of the answers with regard to which direction you need to move in, what you need to do, and how to move forward, and rather than feeling like you're at some sort of a crossroads, actually committing to a direction, whether it's either or both and you reach that commitment end April, beginning of May, after the May new moon, May 8th new moon, whatever that timeline is for you, what do you need to do in order to be ready? Because it could be that you're facing 2 different timelines. One that is more logical and gradual, and if you're trying to get from A to B, takes into account what you would have to do in a normal time frame to get from A to B. Typically, getting from A to B means that things have to be sorted out in A as well, cleaned up, finished up. It's not just I'm moving to B. Another timeline could be accelerated, and that could be a whole other thing. If it's got to be something that you want to do faster or needs to happen faster for you, what does readiness mean? What needs to be cleaned up? The Pisces part of the chart, certainly with Mars going through it, needs a certain amount of action and energy. And right now, with the conjunction with Saturn, it may be planning to build a strong structure. Fine. But action may still need to be taken, particularly as we are heading to the end of April with that Mars-Neptune conjunction. Think things through now with regard to what it is that you're going to be protecting in the Pisces part of the chart. What it is that you're planning to build if you're headed towards building something spiritual or artistic. And welcome any opportunity to be appropriately reflective so that you are grounded and calm. Remember, with Chiron involved in the North Node conjunct Chiron, we've talked about the idea of becoming whole and complete, taking back your power, being grounded, focusing on healing, so that actions that are taken are responsible and have positive, long-lasting consequences. And the healing process could also mean Mercury could go retrograde, also to say, what is it that you do need to process? What are some of the things that you feel you really need to process and take into account or learn from and integrate before you move forward? If there have been repetitive patterns, if there have been things that you feel really need to be addressed in you, that you've gotten that Spirit has given you some strong lessons around, then before you decide to move forward, and before we were going to move forward in that way that January, February, March was accelerating, and maybe Mercury going retrograde said, let's make sure, conjuncting Chiron 3 times with a new moon conjuncting Chiron, let's make sure that you take the time to integrate. What you know, we, us individually, as we are thinking about ourselves, need to integrate and resolve that as we move forward, we will not repeat patterns that are self-sabotaging again. Nothing wrong with being appropriately reflective when destiny and fate at work, because we're dealing with the eclipses. I wrote down the points that I wanted to make in this, so that's why I'm looking down. And of course, getting ready for the Aries part of the chart. But also understanding that whatever's going on in the Pisces part of the chart and the Aries part of the chart is really there to support that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in the Taurus part of our chart. A start of a 12-year cycle in the Taurus part of the chart that is authentic to us and our individuality and our path, not necessarily the conventional way of doing something. The final thing I want to say to you is something that we should really be feeling after any new moon, but particularly a new moon solar eclipse. And I know that Mercury is retrograde. And that is, it's time to start moving again. I think that if the energy feels a little bit like, all right, let's go. Let's get moving. Let's start to head in the direction, even though the direction is not entirely clear yet. And for those of us who have Mercury direct in our birth chart, may not be clear till the end of April, beginning of May, even till June completely, because we want to wait for Mercury to be direct and to gather some momentum. I think, and I suspect, we have a sense of the activities and things we need to be doing in order to get ready, in order to start cleaning up certain things, in order to finish certain things, in order to resolve certain things, in order to clear the slate, clean the slate. Remember that on the 11th, a retrograde Mercury conjuncts the Sun and starts a new communication cycle in the sign of Aries. So on the one hand, I've been saying, not a great time to commit, not a great time to start things. And now the message, the overall message I'm leaving you with is, all right, let's go. Let's get going. I think that will make sense to us all, even though both those feelings seem to contradict each other. We don't have to commit to, now, if you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart and you're ready to commit and you're being decisive, as I said, experiment with how you feel when Mercury is direct every 3 months. Are you somehow more in sync with the energies, and are you more decisive? And if you're ready to feel like, I've been pondering this for a while, for January, February, March, I now feel like I've made up my mind, I now know how it is that I want to move forward, I now know what it is that I want to do, great. And if you observe that over a few more Mercury retrogrades, you'll know what to trust and what not to trust. It's going to be a personal thing for you. For the rest of us who have Mercury direct, I'm not saying that you need to just blindly, while you still don't have the answers, commit to an overall direction that you're waiting to get direction on. Mercury is still retrograde, and do not forget about that April 25th date when Mercury goes direct. There may be more downloads waiting to come? What is in your blind spot? What confirmations that you need? So let that process play out. But I suspect, as with any new moon, and as with any new moon solar eclipse, irrespective of whether Mercury is direct or retrograde, we have that energy of the waves starting to want to move towards the shore. And I think at this point in time, we have a sense of what we need to complete and what we need to do and what we need to take care of. As I said, if it doesn't, if you have Mercury direct in your birth chart, I'm not saying commit to things, sign on contracts, unless it's something that you absolutely feel like this is something I want to do. And I've already given you my warnings on that earlier. They're not dire. They're not horrible. You just need to make sure the details are taken care of, and other things I said with regard to they might be short-lived or look differently after the 25th of April. But everything that we have to do and move forward on is not a commitment to the future necessarily. There are likely to be things that we know we need to start tackling no matter what. And considering we've just had the moon go dark and have a new moon, and we have been in the middle of what has been an anxious time and are getting a chance to regroup. Even though details about what future we are committing to might be unclear at the moment, I suspect strongly that both the energetic impetus and the urgency and the need to get moving on those things that we do know we want to tackle and get done is here. There's a lot that does not involve signing contracts and committing to a final destination. There can be a lot that we feel we need to do, as I said, to complete, for example, the Mercury communication cycle in Capricorn in the next couple of days, to prepare so that once we do know what our destination looks like, we have that much to complete. And in those acts is encoded our let's go, let's start, let's move forward energy. We've kind of had enough, I think, energetically of the eclipses and the Mercury retrograde already, but we've got a couple more weeks to go that we should welcome and be glad that they aren't pushing us. Be glad for the Hanged Man, April. But I do think that it is time with this new moon solar eclipse to get off the tree. We can remain in this mode. We can agree to put ourselves in this mode for a couple of hours a day or 4 hours a day, but no longer all day. And we can get cracking. Okay? I hope this helped. I hope this made sense. I'm trying to see, is there anything else that I wanted to say? No. Mars being checked by Saturn, really loved that and resonated. Thinking about Mercury retrograde affecting not only life overall, but the Aries part of the chart, but also the Virgo and Gemini houses in your chart. Using April as an opportunity to clean things up, but particularly stabilizing, cleaning up the Pisces part of the chart, thinking about what you want to build there. Knowing that we've got 2.5 weeks of Mercury retrograde still left to go, but we've had the new moon occur yesterday and the solar eclipse. So it's a different kind of let's go than we may have felt in July, August of 2023, and then felt with that particular Mercury retrograde that hit us in September that we were thwarted. This particular let's go is happening while Mercury is retrograde. And we know more. We know more. We understand more. we understand that it is not quite an impulsive timeline, but a transition. And so the energy of starting to move and act and achieve things and do things and complete things and clean things and get ready feels very resonant. So let's go. As I said, let's get cracking. Okay. If you found this video useful, feel free to tell your friends, share information about it. If you are interested in finding out about rates for astrology readings, which I do, my email address is in the description box below. You can email me there and I can send you the relevant information. Feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. Click the bell icon next to the subscribe button and the wiggly bell on top and you'll be notified when I do new videos. Like, comment if you feel inclined to do so. It gives the video greater circulation on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who does so and who is helping to build a kind of community around this channel, which is an unexpected joy for me, truly. I will leave it at that. And yeah, until the next video.